Hi, everybody. Claire Wasserman here. I am the founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. We are a platform that teaches women how to level up professionally, financially. Obviously, we have a book that's happening in the background. So if you go to ladiesgetpaid.com/book, you can learn more about the book and what we do there. And every week we have really interesting people either lead webinars or participate in firesides. And I have to say, this is probably one of our most popular fireside that we are hosting. Over 500 folks RSVP'd, and I'm sure many more are watching after the fact. So good to see everybody here live and good to see everybody watching the recording. Kimberly, I'm going to be reading just a couple of sentences of your bio, and you correct me if I got anything wrong. Okay.
You got it.
And if I got anything wrong, it's your publicist's fault. Okay. Kimberly B. Cummings is a leading career and leadership development expert and an accomplished speaker and podcast host whose mission is to empower women and people of color in the workplace. Her personal and professional development company, Manifest Yourself LLC, provides in-person and virtual workshops, trainings, and coachings to professionals looking to lead a dynamic career and life. She also recently published a book titled Next Move, Best Move, Transitioning into a Career You'll Love, and it is a specific and effective framework designed to help guide professionals towards unlocking the full potential of their career. That's a lot of stuff. Okay. Yeah. First of all, how are you doing? Second of all, how did you come about to writing the book?
I am doing all right. It is very rainy in Newark, New Jersey. I'm praying it stops so I can walk my dog when it's not rainy after this. And the book has been something that's been in the works and in the back of my mind for a long time, and I didn't even know it. I did a signature talk back in 2017, and it had the exact same title as my book. So the framework has just been expanded upon again and again and again. Pre-COVID, and now definitely during COVID, I do a lot of speaking. I average at least 50 to 75 gigs a year. And when you do a lot of speaking, you can only do but so much in an hour, right? You can share but so many tips. You can only go but so deep. And I knew I wanted to give something tangible to anyone who interacts with me and anyone who's ready to take their career to the next level. And for me, that was a book. So after, a good amount of time writing and putting it together, I'm very excited to deliver it. And I think the piece I'm most proud of is that it's not just motivation and inspiration and stories about what I did in my career and things my clients have done. But at the end of each chapter, there's a section called Your Next Move, which literally teaches you what to do. So if you are a skimmer, you go to the end of the chapter and it's the Cliff Notes. It'll tell you what to do for your career.
Yeah, I mean, I love that it's sort of part workbook too. I think this is great. You mentioned your own career. So just sort of quickly, personal story, like how did you, actually, you know what? I'm going to read a quote that I read in your book, and then you kind of flesh it out a little bit. So it sounds like you had this boss at some point in your career. I think it was pretty early on. And you said, to this day, I remember my exact feelings when I walked out of his office. My mind focused on one thought. I exceeded my goals for the year, but I could have exceeded them more. I wanted to feel like I had to accept something I disagreed with when it came to my ability to grow and excel, kind of cobbled those together. But talk to me about that experience, sort of flesh it out a little bit more. And was that sort of a turning point in how you were looking at your career and your value?
Definitely. So that was early on in my career. I say that's when I started my career versus just having a job, because I was finally in a role where I knew I wanted to grow, expand. I was going to stay in that industry and work my way up, essentially. That was during a performance appraisal. And if you heard that sentence, y'all, that Claire just said, I exceeded my goals, but I should have further exceeded them to get a promotion. And I left that office so angry, so upset, so disappointed, but I didn't know what to do. I could have just, all I could really do is go to the Mexican restaurant, get my favorite margarita, get some chips and guac, and suck it up and come into work the next day. And I knew that I shouldn't have to feel that way. I didn't like that I didn't have an option. And the process that I share in the book is really what I built for myself and then for my clients, so that you're always creating opportunities for yourself. One of my favorite things is that you have to create a career that creates opportunities for you, so that when a door closes, like, you already have a window, you already have another door. You're not waiting and have to kind of build this process out from scratch, because it takes the average person 6 months to get a new job most of the time. 6 months, sometimes more, sometimes a little less if you're prepared. But imagine if you've been doing the work consistently, if you get into a situation like I was, you have the option to, tough it out if you want to, if it's the right role, right time, advocate for yourself, or you could start knocking on those other doors and you already have contacts so you can make a move for yourself.
Yeah, there's another quote that and I'm going to be reading a lot of quotes of yours.
Oh, I love it.
There's just so many good ones. So the quote, get in and figure it all out, is not a strategy. It's an escape plan. If you want to build a career and ensure your next move is your best move, you must be strategic, right? So we've used the word strategy, which sounds good, but it's also a little intimidating. How do you start building a strategy?
So for me, if we take out the word strategy and just say intentional, like having intentionality with your moves in your career, I think the get in and figure it all out is what most of us do, right? Like, let me just get the job. If I get the job, that's all I need to do. And once I get in there, I'll decide whether we're going to go lateral, we're going to do promotional, I'll make the contacts. But when you're intentional, you know your purpose of why you are there in that job. You know what you're there to learn. You hopefully know what you'd like your next move to be. You have some idea of how you're going to navigate in an ideal state. When I say strategy, it's just understanding where you are right now, what your purpose is being there, and how that sets you up for your next move.
What about the folks who are feeling a little lost and confused? So, and whether they're at the beginning of their career or having a kind of panicked moment of, I think I need to pivot, but what to? Let's maybe get really basic here, sort of 101, defining purpose and taking those first steps towards it.
So I think that's where a lot of folks are, even folks who have been in their career, they're very, very seasoned, but they get to that point of maybe being bored, not being excited to be doing the work that they're doing. So when you take that step all the way back, I love to do a little bit of an assessment where you really take stock of all of your experiences. What are your likes? What are your dislikes? What things bring you joy? And find how you can pull them together, and also identify the things you never want to do again. Because I think a lot of times we discredit those things. It's like, well, I can do it a little bit, but imagine if you did not have to. Imagine if you built your career based upon things that you love and environments that kind of feed your passions and make you happier. That just makes things so much easier. And I think when someone's confused and not understanding that purpose, you really have to tap back into your passions and your strengths.
By the way, guys, if you've got questions or want us to sort of dig in a little bit further, that would be great. I know part of looking at the past in order to see, what can you pull together from that to, navigate into a direction that feels good. Somebody asked a question: do you also focus at all on your weaknesses? Or just really it's about the gifts? And also, if you're really hard on yourself, like, how do you even figure out what those gifts, what those strengths are?
So the first piece of the question, do you have to improve your weaknesses? And I say only if it aligns to your plan.
Mhm.
Improving weaknesses, I think we used to think like, okay, you have to like strengthen those weaknesses, but do you have to? Does strengthening your weaknesses align to your next move? Let's say when I left my corporate career very recently in May, I had gotten to the point where I was aligning to my strength. I was not doing the things I was weak at because I
Mm.
did not want to do them anymore. So I put myself in environments that really played off my strengths, off my interests. And if I was improving upon a weakness, it was because I wanted to. I wanted to build upon that. I wanted to fine tune what that was to make me stronger as an individual and as a professional. I don't think we necessarily have to kind of fall into that. You always have to improve your weaknesses. You can build careers based upon your strengths. A lot of my mentors always say things like, I'm strengthening my strengths. I'm strengthening my strengths. And that really allows you to have more passion and excitement about where you're going next. Now, if you could restate the second part of your question, 'cause I know there are two parts. Like, do I have to do my weaknesses? And what was the second piece?
And the other is just, if you're really hard on yourself, we're just sort of, we're all kind of too close to ourselves, digging into, okay, what are my strengths? What are my skills? And you just, I don't know. I'm not sure, right? What do we say to those people?
So think about the areas where people are asking you for help. What
Mhm.
are they coming to you for all the time? What are they coming to you for assistance? That's a great way if you pull yourself back from like your day-to-day work and what your experience is. And I think a lot of times for high potential people, so I assume everybody on this call is high potential, if not high performing already.
They
Why?
are.
Exactly, because it is 6:30 on a Thursday night and you are listening to things about your career. People who are not high potential and really doing well in their career are not listening to anything about careers in their free time. So I already know that that's where you are. Think about what people come to you for all the time. I know in the workplace, people always come to me for strategy. I got a massage the other day, and the man has his own business. And I was walking through, he's like, I really want to get to here with my business. And I was like, well, what are you doing here? How are you working that? Well, what is your operations model? What happens here? And literally woke up this morning and I texted him like, hey, answer these 3 questions for me. I'd love to kind of map this out. Strategy is always my thing. If you know what you want to get to Z, call me and I will figure out the steps for you to get to A to Z. Strategy has always been my strength. Public speaking, always my strength. And these are things people consistently come back to me for. Think about what people ask you for help with and the things that just come easy to you. Those are the things that you can lean into as your strengths.
Yeah. And I think also how we feel, if we're doing things that kind of make us come alive, right? Where it's almost like time doesn't exist. And by the way, guys, this doesn't have to be something that you do professionally. I'm curious for you, as you were figuring out your path, were there things that you were doing outside of work that was informing the things that you wanted to do more of in work, or where you wanted, maybe other companies you wanted to work for?
100%. I think I spent the bulk of my career in university career services. I joked and said I work with folks ages 18 who don't know what to do with their life, all the way through their 60s, where they're trying to pull their experiences together to do something that really brings them joy as they go into retirement, or so they don't just have to retire. And at the same time, I was building Manifest Yourself, my leadership development company. So I was doing a lot in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. I was running events for Black professionals in New York City. My clientele is generally women and people of color. So it was so much in DEI, but I wasn't formally doing that in career services. But my last job in corporate America, I was the director of global diversity talent acquisition strategy. It was the perfect merger of my business serving women and people of color, plus my career in career services, moving into talent acquisition, because I already understood both sides. And then the strategic part, I really got a lot of that more from my business than I did in my 9 to 5 in career services, because you're always building strategy as an entrepreneur for you to grow and scale. So I would not have gotten that job if I didn't have the experience I had in my company that was essentially my side hustle that I was building at the same time.
Was there a moment, I think I remember reading this in the book, where you were a little worried about your side hustle? I don't know if it would be getting in the way, or people would see that you were working on things outside of work, or did I get that part right? Was there ever
Well,
conflict of interest?
so there was not a conflict of interest. However, I think many employers can be nervous if they're not entrepreneur friendly. So
Yeah.
I always had to be very clear on what my boundaries were, what my rules were. So like, well, this is a conflict of interest. And I'd be like, no, because A, B, and C, these are my rules. This is where I don't cross over, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's really hard, depending upon the company. It's hard to make sure you're advocating for yourself if you really are passionate about building out this business for yourself or running a profitable side hustle, and it's not just a fun passion project that you have.
Right. I think you mentioned, as you were creating your site, this leadership program, I mean, that really was informing what you were doing at work also, while sort of tailoring who you wanted to be moving forward. I just have to say, for everybody watching, every job that I've ever gotten, I only got a response from one cold application that I sent in. They all came from A, relationships, and B, my side projects, my hustles, my entrepreneur spirit. And it was leveraging the things that I learned, right? Being self-motivated, that then got me into whatever the next role ended up being. I mean, there's this quote that you have, which is I'd love you to talk a little bit more about, is if you are waiting for the perfect opportunity to arise to start addressing the gaps in your knowledge, experiences, and relationships, you are too late. Yikes. I mean, guys, if anybody feels like they're too late, you're not, because you're here. But how do we make sure we're not getting to that point to address those gaps?
No, so what I mean by that is that so many times, I think Tara mentioned it earlier in the chat, and that when we want to leave the job so badly, we almost get this sense of desperation because you just want to go. You just want to leave. You don't want to do anything but leave. That's your only concern. And at that time, if you haven't been putting the work in, you have to take a step back. Of course, you can move and kind of what I say, get like a bridge job in between. It's not perfect, but it gets you out of where you are. And hopefully there's some skills there. But the goal is that your next move is always your best move. It sounds corny because now that's the name of my book. But really and truly, you want it to be the best move for you, not because you are desperately running from something. You have to consistently be doing some self-assessment. What is it that you're missing? What skills do you need? What relationships do you need to build? And be doing this alongside all of your tasks and projects, et cetera. So when you're ready to make a move, you don't have to dust anything off. You're already good to go. And that's what's able to close the gap between that 6-month time frame. It could take you 6 months to a year to find a job, but if you've been doing all the work along the way, you're able to just reach out and get started versus literally starting from zero.
Right. I'm going to call out. So we've got a comment question from Natalie. So thank you for that. And she had submitted, I think, this before. She mentions Clifton Strengths, High Five, Myers-Briggs, these sort of surveys used to help us define our strengths and better understand our skill sets. Are they valuable in the hiring process? And if so, how to navigate a strength you don't necessarily jive with? Okay, that's interesting. Maybe if you could talk about like the use of those personal assessments and also identifying values you have, because you do also list them in the book and mention threadsculture.com. So maybe let's talk about understanding our strengths and then understanding our values and how you kind of work through that process, because it can be really overwhelming.
So I think assessments can be very helpful to give you language about yourself. So people who really get nervous and feel like they don't understand what their core values are, what their strengths are, they're just like, I'm out here doing work, right? Like I'm doing my job, I'm doing well, but they need more language to understand who they are, how they work, and how that relates to others. I definitely think that the assessments can be helpful. I don't think they're always necessary, so don't feel like you have to run out and take all of them, but really read up and see which one you really love. I know Clifton Strengths is one of my favorites. Strengths Profile by Capfinity is another one of my favorites. And if you don't feel like you gel with one of your strengths, I think number one, did you really take your time going through these questions? Sometimes, we get a little fatigue going through these assessments. Were you rushing? Were you really paying attention? Because sometimes people just kind of go through and click and you get results that look like you just went through and clicked. Mm-hmm. So did you take your time to really answer thoughtfully and not how you feel like would be the best answer? Because I see a lot of folks do that to try and figure out how it would be good. And then really read deeper into what that strength is. So for instance, my top strength is discipline. And when I saw that, it makes you think that people are just like, yep, this is how we have to do it. It's going to be my way or the highway. But discipline really should be strategic. That's really what it is. It's building out a process and liking to align to that process. The negative side of discipline is that when I build a plan, I really like to stick to it, and I like other people to stick to it too. So sometimes I could be a little rigid if someone tries to come in and shake my plan up and I wasn't ready for it. So you have to think about both sides and see if it really does relate to you in a 360 view. It could be elements of it. And sometimes when you look at your top 2 or top 3, they could be so close too. So you can kind of flex them around if they really are a few points away. And when we talk about core values, those are what I say, like the essence of what makes you happy. That's what allows you to accept or reject things really quickly. Another way of thinking of it is like your gut reaction. Yeah. Generally, when you have a gut reaction that says, oh, no, I can't do that, it's because it does not align with your core value. Like one of my core values is credibility. And I always want to make sure that when I'm sharing something, it is fact all the time. When people work with me on my team, I look for things that are researched. I look for people who like to make sure they're going that next layer deep to ensure that whatever we're putting forth is credible. I don't like mistakes when it comes to credibility. I'm like, my other strength is my core value for my company is also resilience. So if you do make a mistake, you got to come back and do it bigger than better than ever. But the goal is always to be credible and be resilient.
Yeah, let's talk about resilient for a second, because that's been, I think, the key word we've all needed this year. And we did get a few questions about, I want to learn all this and I want to do all this, but God, I'm so tired and burnt out and traumatized, right? So how did you, for you personally, but also just any advice you have about, as we navigate the career strategy, how do we also navigate the way we feel?
Yeah. So you have to understand what season you're in. I did a podcast episode on hustle seasons. And I think it's important to understand, is this your season for rest? Or is this your season for focus and for hustling? I just had a call today with my business coach, and he's like, we got to talk about the season thing because I'm doing a lot of things and I'm a little tired. I'm a little burnt out, if I was very, very honest. And it's difficult to keep going. But I determined, speaking with him, that this is 100% my focus season. It's my hustle season. But the goal is that you have to plan for your rest and for your balance. I don't believe that there is ever perfect balance in anything. Like there's no work-life balance that equals things out perfectly. But I do believe when you're thinking about resilience, it's important to think about the space that you're holding to do all of the things that you want to do, to achieve the goals that you'd like to achieve, and understand what season it is for you right now. Is this your season where you are gunning for it? Like other things are going to get out the way. If you talk to me since January 2021, I haven't seen a lot of friends. I haven't seen a lot of family. I have been talking about this book all day, every day. I do events early, I do events late. You want to talk to Kimberly B. Cummings? You can talk to Kimberly B. Cummings, because you want to talk about my book, you will definitely get me at all times. But there is going to come a time where I'm no longer going to force myself to be resilient when I am tired and I need rest. I'm going to say no. And I think the same thing happens with our careers. When you're gunning for that promotion and you know that you have to show up and show out, that's what you're going to do. But then there's going to come a time where you're going to be able to step back and let things kind of glide just a little bit.
What happens if you're in a funk and you're like, all right, the season has passed, it should have passed by this point. I actually really do like this expression you had. I'm not going to force myself to be resilient.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, if you're just like, I gotta get moving, talk to me about the discipline. How do you cultivate that?
So I think if you're in that moment where you just feel that stuckness, like you're just done with whatever it is that you're doing, you have to determine, like, is this the right path? I think that's the first question. Are you very clear on what the outcome, the vision is for whatever it is you're working toward? Are you on track? Are you not on track? And what do you need to reinvigorate you? I know for me, my mentors and my sponsors always reinvigorate me. So I'll reach out and I'll have that phone call that's going to get me to straighten up and fly right. Like my dad always says, like, get me back on the good path, because I understand what my why is. But I think there's other times where maybe you kind of felt off kilter and you know that this may be a time to reevaluate. An example I have from my past is, after spending nearly 10 years in higher ed, when I was in that job where I didn't get that promotion, my thing was, when I figured it out what I wanted to do, I was like, I want to become a director of career services. And I literally had various jobs to give me all the skills to get there. And I did it almost flawlessly. And when it got to the time where I had enough skills and experience to apply for director jobs, I started doing it. But something was not working. It just was not hitting the way it was supposed to hit. I ended up being top two and always number two, not one, like Beyonce, every single time. And I was getting so discouraged.
Yeah.
And I had one search that really took me out. It was absolutely terrible. I was number two, and they said, obviously, I was number two. You didn't get it. The number one rescinded. They called me back and said, would you still be interested? Oh my gosh, I would. We were talking the money, the salary, everything. Things got a little wonk with communication. Then they came back again and said, actually, no, we're not going to hire for the job. And when I tell you, I was devastated. I already saw myself like getting off the subway with the trench I would be wearing and the boots in the fall, walking to work.
Yeah.
I was
When you have
so
the outfit
devastated.
planned, when you have the
Yes.
outfit planned, you have to wear that outfit. So
Yes.
this is messed up.
I was so devastated that was my time of like, you know what, I'm going to sit out. I'm going to sit out for a minute and get myself in order. And I ended up transitioning then into corporate America.
Talk to me about that actually. When you, and I'm curious, everybody here, do y'all have like specific moments that you have experienced where you were like, okay, if this was a movie and I'm watching it, I see that it is a time that I need to make a different decision, or like you're watching yourself pass from one season into the next. So you're devastated. How did you pick yourself up and how did you make that decision to say, I think it might be a different direction? Can you hear me still? Oh, asked to unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry, I was coughing, so I put myself on mute.
Oh, oh, okay. Well, I appreciate that, but you didn't have to. Yeah, was I muted? No, you heard my
Oh,
question.
no. Yes, I heard your question.
Okay.
I was just muted coughing. So that transition is the perfect example of what I call magic in your career. Because I think you can plan as much as you can plan, you can strategize as much as you can strategize. But I think it's very important to always leave room for magic. And by magic, I mean just those perfect circumstances that come together to create an opportunity that was not on your radar. I had dabbled in applying into HR talent acquisition jobs, but I was never serious, not really serious. And my husband went to a networking event. And no, I say my husband went. He went to a networking event and he met someone who worked in diversity, equity, and inclusion at a company. And he came back, he's like, babe, you got to meet this girl. She was amazing. I think you all would get along. He introduced us via email, and it was November. So it was, when things happen around Thanksgiving, you're not talking to anybody until the new year at that point, with holidays and time off. It's really just wait. And around, I think it was like December 14th, she reached back out after I sent her my resume. We said, okay, we'll connect in the new year. She's like, hey, there is an opportunity open at my sister company. And it sounds like what your husband said you wanted. Do you want me to throw your resume in? And I said, sure. I was hired within 14 days, right before Christmas. Like you had to do drug testing for this job. And I took the drug testing on Christmas Eve. Like my parents dropped me off. How embarrassing. To the center to go get the testing because it was mandatory and I needed to get it so I could start in the new year. It happened so fast. And to me, that's what magic is. They didn't even meet me. They just remember the conversation my husband had about where I wanted to go in my career. And that's how I transitioned into corporate America. It was a perfect job. So much so that when I left in May, I was really sad. Really,
Because
really sad.
different from where you would come from. Was there any self-doubt? Can I do this? And the reason I ask is because you've probably read these statistics, right? Where, women don't apply to don't apply as often to jobs as men do if they don't feel like they hit close to 100% of the requirement.
Oh, yeah.
So for you, did you experience that at all? Or have you experienced that? And, how do we navigate past this? There is self-doubt, which is real because you haven't done it. There's also I don't know the skills yet. I'm gonna have to learn quickly too. So there's the practical and there's sort of the emotional. How have you kind of straddled that in your career?
I think that transition into corporate America is the perfect example to talk about this. I was scared.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was so scared moving into a Fortune 100 company. Yes, I was working at Ivy League institutions. So when we're talking about the top of whatever your industry or field, I was at the top in higher ed, but coming into corporate America, it was different. And I think there's also a stigma in corporate America about people who come from nonprofits, education, et cetera, that you can't hack it, you can't go fast enough, whatever it is. So I felt I was fighting against the stigma. I was fighting against my mind. I was fighting against merging my career up until that time and my business coming together. The role was an inaugural role. So my last 3 roles professionally, I was always the first person to be in it. So I had to come in, build the strategy, build the team, all of the things. But this was at a much larger scale. So oh my gosh, I was so scared. When I first got the job, I worked around the clock to kind of get myself up to where I needed to be. I reached out to my friends, to my mentors to make sure I had the language, and I showed up making sure I sounded more credible because I wanted to make sure I had it. So I think I've 100% felt that way. I think that kind of alludes to imposter syndrome. But the thing about imposter syndrome, and I don't think a lot of people agree with it, but when I say it, I think people understand it, is that I like imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome makes me feel challenged. I don't want to walk into a room where I'm always the smartest person, where I'm always giving and not also receiving. When I feel like an imposter, when I feel that, oh gosh, like I'm not really sure if I should even be here. Do I know enough to be in here? That means it's probably the perfect room for me. So I almost seek out that feeling now because I know that it's going to help me.
I love that you said that because I write about that in the book. Also, it's not bad to feel a bit of imposter syndrome because if you've done this before, you're probably not growing, right?
Exactly.
If you haven't done something before, oh my God, there's so many opportunities for you, and you just have to have a little bit of faith in yourself and trust yourself. For those who are in roles where they're not ready to leave yet, but they're feeling again unchallenged, right? Or they're not being given the opportunities they want. How do you create those opportunities? So first, I guess, how do you kind of find the opportunities within your organization? And then how do you maybe like pitch yourself to be the one to lead whatever the initiative is to fill the gap of the opportunity?
So I think there's two things. If you are feeling a little bored, a little stuck, and you haven't been able to move, I think you need to understand where you want to go exactly. Where is it that you want your next move to be, whether it's internal or external to that company, and understand what is that gap? What is it that you need to learn to prepare you for that next move to make sure that you, whatever you add or whatever you are innovating on is aligned to that to make sure you get on the right project, you make the right relationship. So once you know what that gap is, then make sure you can see if you can align that gap to your current job. And one of my favorite presentations that I do is creating and presenting strategic ideas. So I think it's one thing to have an idea and like throw spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks, but it's another thing to really present it strategically, creating that roadmap and vision to help take you to the next level. And so I think it's important to make sure that your idea is not just about something that you feel is good for you, something you're excited about, but be clear on how does the idea impact your department? How does it impact your team? How does it impact the company? What is the resourcing that is needed to do this work? What does the good, better, best look like of you implementing it? I think the key is really making sure that you don't just have a good idea, but you're showcasing your level of knowledge surpasses anyone else who would be doing this because it's your idea to make sure you can hold that body of work. The thing I get so upset about for a lot of my clients is when they present ideas and they don't kind of put the full roadmap out there. So the manager says, oh my gosh, that's great. Like, let's have Jim do it instead. And you're just like, this wasn't Jim's project. It was
Right.
my project. So
Right.
that's why I'm really big on making sure you create that strategic plan so that people can really see like, oh, she's already got this. It's already put together. Like, let her run with this.
Right, right. It's not just about the idea, but it's about you doing the idea.
Exactly.
And also, I just want to piggyback off of that really quick. This is from my own personal experience. When I had pitched something really big, I had a feeling that I was going to be told no because of budget. So I proactively addressed the issues I knew
Yeah.
they were going to have, but I also had a backup plan for something that was maybe smaller that we could look at as a way of kind of testing, and already had, my presentation of, well, how are we going to define and measure success for this little test version? Because I
Exactly.
need to know that if I meet those measures of success, that we can move forward and that there is some sort of accountability. And you mentioned this in the book when you talk about kind of managing up, right?
Mhm.
Like you have to manage your managers. Can you actually go a little bit deeper into that part? Because I think it's so crucial. I wish we all were taught this in college. In our, it's important our whole careers to understand how to manage up, but especially I think when you're new and we're afraid of making mistakes, we
Yeah.
don't, and we go off of however the vibe is from the manager and they're busy and maybe they're not a great manager. You have to be the one directing them. It's helping them help you help them. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
No, I think exactly. Managing is probably another one of my favorite topics. Fun fact, that's what I want my next book to be about. Managing up, down, and across. But when we're talking about managing up, I think it's so much about like anticipating needs and understanding that person's perspective. Whenever I hired for my team, my last team that I hired and built was almost 8 people. And one of the first things I always do is create a working styles quiz. And I have everyone take the working styles quiz. And I ask questions like, how do you like to receive feedback? If I see that you're quiet on a call, what does this mean? What is the most common misconception about you in the workplace? What are things that your last manager did that you love? What do they hate? I have a list of about 20 questions I have them do, so that as a leader, when I look at them in the room when they're not speaking, or if I want to give them feedback, I have an idea of how to do it to the best of my abilities, that it's received well, not just kind of pushing how I do things on that person as much as possible. And I think when we're talking about managing up, it's also about understanding how your manager sees the world. What other things are they working on? How do they like to receive information? How can you also start anticipating their needs? So for me, I am naturally not a micromanager at all. It actually makes me really angry if I have to micromanage. I like to give you A and give you Z. I don't care how you get there, just get there. And give me a good update when I ask about it, but I don't need to see the craziness in between. However, if I'm micromanaging you, it's because I can't trust you. It's because when I asked you last time, what was the status update, you hummed and hawed, and I realized you didn't do anything. So now I have to be on you because I can't trust you. Because when I went to my boss, they were like, where's the status update? And I was like, oh my gosh, Stacey didn't even touch it yet. I'm so sorry. So my micromanaging is from not seeing something from someone. So when you see a behavior in your leader that you don't like, it's important to make a distinction of, is this who they are? Or is this part of the relationship that you need to work on in order to make it more functional? And we go back to creating and presenting strategic ideas, or putting your ideas out in the workplace. I think that's also something people miss out on, is thinking about what are the questions that your boss is going to preemptively ask. Because if we really sit down and we think about it, those after work drinks that you have when you're making fun of your boss and you're saying all the things they usually say, what they're going to say. So make sure that you address those concerns preemptively. And that just helps the relationship flow so much easier.
People are asking, where can they get these questions? I mean, I don't know if you have it. Was there a name, or is this a Kimberly B.
If you look
Cummings?
up, I actually have a list, but it's called the Working Styles Quiz.
Okay.
I'm sure my information is somewhere. If you shoot me an email, I can send it to you. But there are so many different versions of it. Generally, it's called a Working Styles Quiz.
Awesome. Okay, I just took a note, and I'm sure hopefully everybody else is taking note. Okay, so you are feeling all right. So you like have your communication set with your manager. You're seeing opportunities. You're pitching themselves for it. Impact. So it's so crucial that you understand your impact on the business bottom line, both for what opportunities that you can lean into at your company, and also moving on to the next company. You have to be able to articulate what that impact was. I think for a number of folks, especially women, we oftentimes are in roles that it's not so obvious or clear about the business impact, right? More men are in sales. You can say there's, key metrics there. How do we figure out our impact? Yeah, I have some thoughts, but I just think we need to really go into this for everybody, because without knowing your impact, you really sort of don't know what you're doing.
Now, I love that. And I think I'm excited to hear what you have to say on this too. When I think of impact, I kind of think of value proposition and innovation. When you look at the job, I do this comparison between The Big Leap. Have you read The Big Leap, Claire? It's one of my favorites.
No, I'm taking note. Like I am listening as if I am an attendee, to be clear.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, so The Big Leap kind of talks about where your zone of genius is. It's a mindset book, and the methodology is that when you operate in your zone of genius, you're killing the game. No one can do better than you, because that's where you belong. So there's zone of incompetence, which is clear. That's almost like the talent designation of needs improvement, right? That's zone of incompetence. Zone of competence is meet expectations. Like, you are doing your job. You do your job, you get a paycheck. You get a paycheck because you do your job. You don't get a promotion because you're just doing your job. Then there's zone of excellence. That's where most high performers generally get stuck. That's where you're doing a little bit more, but it's comfortable, right? It's just definitely what you normally do, right? Like, you're someone who always shows up on time. You always do a little bit more. You always give the next level, that zone of excellence. But the magic where that happens is distinguished. Distinguish that zone of genius. No one can mess with you in that area, because you do it so much better than everyone else. And that is where the magic happens when it comes to impact. Like, how are you innovating? How are you adding your stamp on things? And how are you making sure you're tracking that? And it doesn't have to be quantitative, because I think many times we think about metrics. Not every job is metric driven. So qualitatively, what is happening? When you hear feedback from individuals, what are the things that you're hearing about how your work is changed? How have you recrafted your job description and improved existing processes and systems in your job? What is your stamp? That's what I really think about impact. And impact generally comes when you get to that distinguished zone of genius area.
Yeah. And the only that's amazing. And I took notes on that. The only thing I would add to it is really everybody needs to understand where their company, the direction their company is going in. Where is the company growing? Like, what are they investing in? Also the industry. And what's your role in the growth of the company and the industry? And if you don't know that, think about maybe who does, who can give you some insight, especially folks at companies. I call them guides, people who have been there for a long time, people who are kind of well networked, which could be the IT person, could be the executive assistant, right? Like they have an understanding of sort of the dynamics behind the scenes. And you can ask your manager, I want to have a really clear understanding from a business standpoint what my impact is, how our team fits into the next team, because I want to think like an entrepreneur and I want to be a leader here, right? So don't be afraid. You're not snooping. Like you're, yeah. So I think that's great. And relationships are sort of everything. You mentioned that in the book you say that you should arrange your relationships under 4 categories. What are those 4 categories?
I think this is the question I've gotten asked the most about with the book. So we have your peers. Those are people who are inside and outside of your company, your colleagues in the industry. And no, I say inside and outside of the company. They can't just be inside your company, because once you get into more senior level roles, benchmarking and making sure you know what your peers are doing are so important. And to do that, you can't always find it online on the internet. You've got to have people in the know. Next up are your teachers. Those are the folks who can literally teach you how to do something, whether that's understanding how to input the company branding into your deck, how to speak to a leader who's known for being really, really difficult. Or if you're like me, I can never get my Excel pivot table to link to the PowerPoint and make it all work. I don't care what Google says, it never works for me. I always need people when it comes to Excel and all of that integration. They're literally teaching you a skill. They don't have to be more senior. They can be anyone who can literally teach you how to do that skill. So we have our peers, we have our teachers. I also call those coaches sometimes. Next up, we have our mentors. Those are the folks who've been there, done that. That's probably the most common relationship we hear about with professionals. They generally help you in that day-to-day, giving you feedback, helping you navigate the nuances of your role. And then last but not least, we have sponsors. And this is the conversation that I love hearing, because so many times we used to call this person also a mentor, but there is a key difference. The sponsor is someone who has influence. They're the person who can literally pick you up from where you are and bring you to where you rightfully belong. When you want their promotion, that promotion, they're in a room that you probably will not be in at all. They are speaking on your behalf in rooms you've never been into, and it literally can change the trajectory of your career. People always ask, can the mentor and sponsor be the same? Sometimes they can, but not every mentor has influence. They can even be more, the mentor can be more senior than you, but they may not have the influence to really change things for you.
I also think in the book you mentioned when the consistency of staying in touch, but also you have to talk about your wins. Like you have to be unafraid of, hyping yourself up, because it's not just your questions you're bringing, you're also giving them confidence that they should go to bat for you. So how, I know that oftentimes women feel uncomfortable with this, right? Because we're socialized to be accommodating, right? To put others first. Has that been something you've ever struggled with, and B, advice for those who maybe are?
100%. I think even as we talk about salary negotiation, I do a lot of talks on salary negotiation, and people are always like, how did you get so confident in talking about it? I'm like, when I realized that I can change my salary by 10, 15, 20, 30, $40,000 sign-on bonus, I got real comfortable talking about money and sharing why I'm able to create an impact in the workplace that warrants a higher salary. a lot of times when we talk about advocating for ourselves and sharing our wins, it feels like we're just doing too much. It seems like you're bragging. But in reality, you're sharing facts about your experience. It's not bragging if it's a fact. You're not boasting and sitting here saying, oh, you can throw a ball, like throw a football, how many yards, and you've never thrown it before. Like you're not just guessing with someone next to you. You're saying you have done A, B, C, and D, and if given the opportunity, you can take it even more so because you did it already. That's a very different conversation. And I think when you think about the facts of who you are and what you've done, you have to kind of stand on that experience and not think about it as bragging or boasting. And also remember, the first chapter of my book is called Serving as a People Leader is a Privilege, Not a Rite of Passage. And when you are a people leader, when you are a manager of your peers, you have your own job, generally on top of managing other people. Sometimes you don't know all the nuances of all the people you manage because you have your own job. You have to do your own tasks as well as manage everybody else and all of their tasks. So when you're speaking about your skills and your wins, whether they're mentors or sponsors or just relationships that you're building, remember they have their own stuff too. It's not their job to remember all the nuances of who you are and all the great things that you've done. Make it easy for them. Make sure you share.
And you mentioned this before where you have to answer your boss about what's going on with the team. So you know, if you're communicating that to your boss, you're helping them, right?
Exactly.
And you're also talking about the service that you provided to the company, how you've helped the company. So it is interesting. That mindset shift, I think, is really poignant. And I'm glad that you pointed it out. I'm realizing as I look back in the Eventbrite, we said a 2-year career strategy, why you need it. Oftentimes we hear like 5-year plan, which always felt kind of intimidating to me. So what's this 2-year stuff?
I love that. So the 2 years I feel like is much more tangible. As we're thinking about the world of work now, I think when we think about all of our baby boomer parents, many times they stayed in a job for 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And that was the norm. But now as we're thinking about the world of work, people are moving in 2 to 5 years easily into different positions, getting promoted, moving just because they want to, because there's a better opportunity for them. So 2 years, I feel, is a reasonable amount of time to really master something and create some type of impact. So the way I look at it is if I snap my fingers, if you're ever working with me in any of my programs, I snap my fingers and I say, okay, what is your 10-year goal? And I want you to tell me in 5 seconds or less. Where is the vision of where you see yourself in 10 years? And I'm like, perfect. Okay. Now let's cut that in half and let's bring it to 5. Where do you need to be in 5 years to get to the 10-year? And then we cut it in half again, a little more than half, and say, where do we need to be in 2 years to get to the 5-year? And then we start backtracking at that 2-year mark to where you are today and what are the things you need to do in order to be prepared at 2 years to make a strategic move that is in support of your goals. Now, your 5 and 10-year goal may change. Of course it can. Things change every single day. But the goal is that you're moving with intentionality by acquiring skills, experiences that are helping you rise to the next level versus just kind of hoping that it happens, hoping this is the right experience. Reverse engineering a growth plan. Exactly what Judy just said. I think it's like when you want to get fit, right? Years ago, I was training for a bodybuilding competition. There is a exact process of how you do it. Things change every single week. There's so many other processes we do in our lives that we know how to reverse engineer, but we don't think about our careers that same way.
What happens if you don't know what your 10-year plan is, or even your 5-year? Whatever, you know, I guess I already sort of went over this at the beginning of like feeling lost.
Then we kind of start at the beginning of what do you think you would enjoy doing? And then we build a plan off of what at least are the skills that you will be gaining in those 2 years. I don't ever recommend, just trying something, just putting it out there and trying it. But I do recommend that you really think about what are the skills you feel would be helpful in this phase of your career. You're always adding skills and experiences to your career toolkit. Just make sure that you're doing that intentionally so you can look back and say, this is why I did this. I did this to gain this skill. And when you've gained it, now it's time to kind of move along.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of if I don't know, but I think, who can I talk to?
Yes.
What questions can I ask? And a lot of that does come down to like what time, what does your actual day look like?
Exactly.
The other thing I would just piggyback off of that is what problems do I like to solve? What am I curious about? Right. And not thinking necessarily this has to be a career. It's just
Exactly.
a direction. I'm curious, how do you know when to move on? Like, I think a lot there, and is there such a thing as staying too long at a job?
I don't think that necessarily a time where it's too long. It's very personal.
Mhm.
Some people want to stay for a long time. Some people are just happy. I know there's roles that you could be in for a long time. I know my last role in corporate America, I could have stayed in that role for quite a time.
Mhm.
I could have stayed in that role a very long time. There was so much work to be done. That wasn't a 2-year job. Not at all. If it was a longer job, it was one of those roles where you can get promoted in that role and keep doing that work, but you get a title change because of the scope of the work and whatnot. Um, I don't think that anything is too long as you're okay with it, as long as you don't feel stuck. That's when it's too long. But I think it's a really personal choice. I have a whole chapter on how to know when it's time to go in the book. And I think it could be disagreements that you're having, that you feel it's really time for you to move out of the role that you're in. It could be you feeling stuck. It could be determining that there's a glass ceiling and you've really done all you can do in that job, in that company, and now it's time to move. There are a lot of reasons, but I think it's very personal. You essentially have to know when you've had enough in that opportunity. And it doesn't always have to be negative, but when you know that, you've fulfilled your purpose in that area.
Yeah, and I think constantly looking at what's out there. My soon to be in law, she did a very brilliant thing. She's happy where she works, very happy, but she was thinking about maybe asking for a raise. So she started to do some market research. As she's doing the market research, she's looking at open jobs. She was thinking maybe I need to get a counteroffer, but wasn't quite comfortable with that. Just wanted to get an understanding, get sort of the pulse of the market. And then she saw a job opening that was beyond what she could have even imagined. And she went and she applied. Now she's in the third round of interviews. I hope I didn't jinx her, but it's been
No,
fun for her to apply because she's not desperate, right? And I'm just so proud of her, right? So it's like you always keep your eyes and ears open. And I'm curious just for the folks who are feeling like they need to make a hard pivot, and don't have quite the, quote, traditional, skills or the experience that makes them a candidate that, quote, makes sense. How do you sell those skills as transferable if you are applying for a new job that's a little bit outside the box?
so it's, you have to connect the dots for the person. I think many times when we have unique skills that we feel aren't knowingly, like you don't just look at them and say, oh, this prepared me for this. It's your job as a candidate to connect that for the hiring leader, the recruiter, et cetera. Spell it out for them. Doing this would help me do this, and this is why. This experience has prepared me to do this. Don't let them look at it. People still they look at resumes, but it's quick, 30 seconds or less. They're looking at your LinkedIn profiles again, 30 seconds or less. They're not going to take the time to add those dots together. It's your job as a candidate to do that when you get a phone screening, when you speak with your mentors, or when you're writing a cover letter. And yes, I think cover letters are still good in a lot of cases, especially if you're making a career change that needs to be explained. That's the only place that you can do it. So definitely connect the dots for them. Don't wait for someone else to connect it for you. And make sure you're kind of removing some of that jargon. I think we all have jargon in our own careers. Remove some of that jargon when you're speaking in your documents to make sure it also sounds transferable when the person is reading it.
We got some questions that were submitted for your fireside, but also for some other ones about being older, transitioning when you're older, about ageism. I'm assuming everything we've talked about is transferable as advice for any level or age. But do you have anything specific that you might want to address, anybody who's on the sort of older end of the work spectrum?
So I get this question a lot. And my initial reaction is no. My initial reaction is a lot of the work is mindset.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times my clientele, so I see across the board, a lot of times my clientele who has that 20, 25, 30 years of experience, I think there is a mindset miss where they're walking into interviews and environments already thinking that people don't want them there, already thinking that this isn't a good fit. They're going to think that I'm overqualified, overaged, over whatever it is. So I think also like correcting some of that mindset when you walk into it, so you don't go in counting yourself out before someone else does. And when you have a lot of experience, I think articulating those transferable skills is even more important, to make sure that people understand your story. They understand why you want to move into this job at this time, especially if you're making a change. But I do think a lot could be mindset. And if there are unique circumstances, then of course, make sure that you're figuring out the story to address those things.
And I think also for somebody who's new in their career, also for somebody who pivots, just show that you're a really fast learner.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that your hustle, you move quickly, who you are, right? That you're resilient, that you're creative, right? So it's, I don't know if we would say that they're the soft skills, but they're hiring you to be part of a team dynamic too. They're seeing if you have values that are aligned with the company. I know we only have like 1 or 2 more minutes left, but one of my last questions was, how do you know if this is the right company to go to? How do you evaluate whether or not to either apply or to take the job, so that you don't find yourself in a position where you desperately want to get out, or you feel like you've made, quote, a wrong move, if there's even any such thing as a wrong move?
I think there definitely is. And I think it's important to do your research, and not just online on LinkedIn and Glassdoor and all those things, because you already know people who are dissatisfied love to write reviews. People who
Yeah.
are satisfied are happy, and they go about their life being happy. So when you look at the reviews, it's really, you can only take them with a grain of salt sometimes. The only way you can truly know what's happening in a company is through relationships. So I always recommend doing your due diligence to try and find someone you can speak to make sure that the core values that are on their beautiful website and the interviews that you have, they're actually being authentic. And also in all of your interviews, make sure you're asking questions. Use that opportunity to make sure that you're confirming what you've seen, asking deeper questions about challenges, about red tape, about how things work, how to navigate, about upward mobility. Ask some of those hard questions. And I think if they're unable to answer the hard questions, it may be a sign that this may not be the right place for you. And be okay with walking away if you can. I think it's really tough not early in my career, but one of the interviews I had years ago, I remember I generally move every 2.5 to 3.25 years. Generally, that's how things moved in my career. An opportunity always presented itself. I had made my impact, my value, and I transitioned. And I was applying for this job. And I remember I got to the final rounds, and the president of the university said, "Hey, like, I feel like you like to job hop. Like you move every 2.5 to 3 years or so. Like, we want someone who's going to stay here a long time. What, like, can you say that you would stay here that long? Like, we want someone 5 to 10." And I countered and said, "What would you do to keep me? Like, what are you doing to retain me in a job?" He obviously didn't like that. I don't remember his answer, but it wasn't good and I didn't get the job. But for me, that was a red flag. Like, what are you doing to keep your employees? If you're not going to do the things to also work on retention, how am I going to be inspired to stay? How is
Right.
your university innovating? What other projects would I have? How else can I get involved? Because we had a whole conversation about like involvement in other things as well and support in those areas, but they didn't really have any good answers.
Right, right. And this is a relationship that goes both ways. My last question is, a career strategy is not this is what you said, is not a document that you put together once and wait for the magic to happen. It's a fluid body of work. How do you know when you should revisit it? I'm assuming it's not when you're in crisis mode. So how often should we be reflecting, rethinking, and kind of retooling?
I think when you're going through your performance appraisal process, it's perfect time to take a peek. What is
Mm,
going on there? What is happening? Do you feel like you're still in alignment? And when you are in crisis and you feel like things are shaky, like, are you on the right track? I think it is a good time to look. But any time that you are kind of looking at your career, doing any big projects, moving in a new direction, take a peek and see, are you in alignment? If you are not in alignment, how can you navigate yourself back? Different roles change and move, and you could be leaning maybe toward a direction you don't want to lean in. Maybe your business, your department is splitting into two, and they have you kind of decked to go on the right. And you're like, no, 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 like, the left is my plan. I want to be on the left. It's important to know what's happening and pay attention and see, okay, maybe I need to renavigate a little bit and kind of push to this side instead.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm loving this chat. I know you guys are all getting active as we're wrapping it up. But Kimberly, give us the pitch next. Where can we find you, follow you, purchase the book? I find that these talks, they're always so inspiring, but oftentimes they inspire a lot more questions, which is great because we got a couple hundred pages here. But yeah, what's next for you? What's next for you, and how can we all support you?
Yes. So if you would like to support me, please grab my book. If you go to nextmovebestmovebook.com, there are all the links there to purchase it on all your favorite sites, Amazon, Walmart, Target, wherever you buy books, you can go ahead and grab it, Barnes and Noble. And of course, I'm on all the socials. Like most folks, Instagram is probably where I am the most, Instagram and LinkedIn. So Kim B. Cummings or Kimberly B. Cummings. If you search that on LinkedIn, I am there. I love to have conversations. So please shoot me a DM, reach out to me. I love to have conversation. And I love voice notes too. Feel free to send me voice notes. That makes it easier.
Yes, I love that. I love voice notes too. I guess it's the sort of digital, or not digital, but it's sort of the 2021 equivalent of a letter mail-ish, because I just speaks to me literally. For those of you interested in joining Ladies Get Paid, please do ladiesgetpaid.com. We'll add you to our private network. It's free. Also, somebody asked, should I hire somebody to do my LinkedIn? Well, before you do that, come and watch our videos on it. So ladiesgetpaid.com, you'll also see a whole video library, ladiesgetpaid.com/book for our book, and Claire Gets Paid on Instagram. And thank you, Kimberly. Thank you for everybody watching. The fact that you're all here, you should feel very, very proud. You are one step closer to what you want to do, even if you're just still not unsure. You're getting there, and just keep one foot in front of the other and have sort of faith in that and in yourself. Any last words of wisdom? Otherwise, I will just give you a big wave and hope that you are no other gigs today, that you are off.
Oh, I'm going to bed tonight, but I will say my final word is always the manifesto that I end my book with. So it's, you must believe in yourself and your vision. When you do this, you will manifest the life you desire. Everything starts with belief in yourself that you can do the things you want to do, including be in a career that you'll love.
Yes. And we both are examples of that. Absolutely. Yeah, nobody gave us what we're doing. We created it. So thank you for saying that. Thank you all for being here, and stay well. Bye, guys.